The streetlights flickered in the cool night air, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Cedar Grove Estates. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever happened, or so everyone believed. The hum of distant lawnmowers and the occasional bark of a dog were the only sounds breaking the stillness. But tonight, something was different. Jessica Monroe, freshly back from a grueling overseas assignment, craved the silence. The steady rhythm of her footsteps on the pavement was a balm to the chaos she'd left behind. She had just returned to her childhood home, a rare visit meant to reconnect with family and recharge. The calm of the neighborhood was a stark contrast to the flashbangs and threats she had faced on her last mission. As she strolled under the towering oaks lining the street, her mind replayed fragments of classified intel, the kind that never left an FBI tactical commander's memory. But tonight was meant for peace, just a quick walk, a breath of fresh air before she turned in. Then, from the shadows ahead, a figure emerged. Jessica froze mid-step. A man in a dark security uniform stepped into the dim pool of streetlight. His eyes, cold and wary, locked onto her with unnerving intensity. In one swift motion, his hand moved to the holster at his side. The metallic glint of a handgun caught the weak street lamp glow as it was drawn and leveled at her chest. "Stop right there," he barked. Her heart slammed against her ribs, but years of training kicked in. She didn't reach for her own weapon. There wasn't one. This was her home turf, the place she was supposed to feel safe. "Who are you? What are you doing out?" "Here," the guard demanded, voice low and harsh. Jessica's voice stayed calm, measured. "I live here. Jessica Monroe, FBI Tactical Commander." The guard's eyes narrowed. "I don't care who you are. You're not supposed to be out after dark. Identify yourself." Jessica's gaze didn't waver. She understood the protocol. They had orders to watch for trespassers, to act decisively. But this wasn't some random stranger. This was a mistake that could cost someone their life. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble," she said slowly, carefully. "I'm just out for a walk. You can check with the HOA. I live at 12 Maple." The guard hesitated. His grip on the gun faltered for a heartbeat, but the tension didn't ease. Something about Jessica unsettled him, her unwavering calm, the air of command she radiated. Suddenly, the night exploded with the sharp bark of a radio crackling. In his ear, orders. Backup was en route. Jessica's mind raced. The guard was nervous, but he had been given a green light to act. No room for second guesses. This was spiraling fast, and if she wasn't careful, it could turn deadly in seconds. "Put the gun down," she said firmly, stepping forward just a fraction, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "Let me show you my badge." The guard's finger twitched near the trigger, a flicker of something in Jessica's eyes. A warning, a promise, made him pause. She pulled her FBI ID from her jacket and held it steady. The guard blinked, scanning the hologram and credentials. His breathing slowed, the rigid tension in his posture melting away just enough to lower the weapon. But the silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken threats. Jessica knew this night was far from over. Whatever had triggered the guard's aggression wasn't just fear. It was something darker. And in Cedar Grove Estates, beneath the perfect lawns and white picket fences, danger was waiting. The security guard's eyes flicked from the badge to Jessica's face and back again. His hand trembled slightly as he lowered the gun, but the unease in his gaze didn't fade. The radio crackled again in his ear, sharp and insistent, breaking the fragile calm. "Hold your position," the voice ordered. "Backup's 5 minutes out." Jessica kept her hands visible, her stance relaxed but ready. Every muscle was coiled beneath her calm exterior, alert to any sudden moves. She knew how quickly situations like this could spiral, how the smallest misstep could turn a routine check into a deadly confrontation. "Why the gun?" she asked quietly, voice steady but edged with steel. "This is my neighborhood," You've got a security force, not a SWAT team. The guard hesitated. His jaw clenched as if fighting an internal battle. Finally, he said, "We've had incidents. Break-ins, suspicious people lurking around at night. Orders are to act fast." Jessica nodded slowly. She understood the paranoia that could grip a tight-knit community, but this felt excessive, dangerous even. "Did anyone call you about me?" she pressed. "Did someone report suspicious activity?" The guard's gaze flicked away, then back. "No. No calls. I spotted you walking. Didn't recognize you. You didn't respond when I called out." Jessica sighed inwardly. The truth was, her military-style demeanor and tactical gear from her last mission made her look like a threat to someone who wasn't trained to read those signs. But that wasn't an excuse for pulling a gun without warning. "I get it," she said, voice softer now. "You're scared. You think you're protecting this neighborhood." He looked at her then, really looked, and the tension in his eyes wavered. "Yeah," he admitted quietly. "It's a job that's gotten complicated. Everyone's on edge." Before Jessica could respond, the faint crunch of tires on gravel echoed down the street. Backup had arrived. 2 more security guards appeared, flanking the first, their expressions grim and alert. Jessica's heart rate quickened. This was no longer just a misunderstanding. It was an armed standoff with a team ready for confrontation. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," one of the new guards said, voice clipped and professional. Jessica's mind raced. She could comply, but something in the group's demeanor told her this was about more than just a routine security check. There was fear, yes, but also suspicion, maybe even hostility. "I'm not causing trouble," she said, stepping forward. "Let's talk this out." The lead guard's eyes flicked to the others, then back. "Orders are orders. You'll come quietly." Jessica glanced toward the houses, the silent windows watching the unfolding drama like distant spectators. She felt the weight of every stare, every whispered judgment from behind closed doors. Then, without warning, the lead guard took a half-step forward, hand twitching toward his holster again. Jessica's instincts screamed. She reacted in a heartbeat. "Wait!" she commanded, voice sharp as a whip. The guards froze, eyes wide. "I'm FBI, tactical commander. You're making a huge mistake," she said, voice low but unwavering. "Put the weapons down." There was a tense silence, like the calm before a storm. Then, from the shadows, a faint voice whispered, barely audible but charged with meaning. "Jessica." Her heart skipped a beat. Someone was watching, someone who knew more than they should. The guards glanced around nervously. Jessica's gaze hardened. This was no random security patrol. This was something bigger, and the night was far from over. The night air felt heavier now, thick with unspoken fears and mounting tension. Behind the uniform, behind the badge, the guard, David Mercer, stood rigid, his mind a storm of conflicted emotions. To the neighborhood, he was just the vigilant protector, the enforcer of rules. But beneath that facade, David was a man grappling with his own demons. Years ago, before he became the HOA's security lead, David had served as a military contractor in unstable zones overseas. The memories haunted him, the sudden gunfire, the faces of those he couldn't save. When he returned home to Cedar Grove Estates, he thought the nightmares would fade. Instead, the paranoia followed. The HOA had promised him authority, respect, a chance to control what once felt uncontrollable. But the job was far from easy. Pressure from the board to crack down on undesirables had transformed the security team into something more aggressive, more dangerous. David's grip tightened around his holstered gun as he watched Jessica Monroe stand there, calm, commanding, unshaken. She was a stranger in uniform, yet there was something familiar about her posture, the way she carried herself. He couldn't quite place it, but it made him uneasy. "Orders are clear," he muttered under his breath. No exceptions. But even as he reminded himself, doubt crept in. Had he really done the right thing by pulling his weapon on someone? In their own neighborhood? On someone who claimed to be FBI? His radio buzzed again, the voice clipped and distant, but his ears caught something more. A warning, maybe. Be careful. Things are complicated. Complicated was an understatement. David's mind flashed back to a call he had received earlier that week. A veiled threat from a shadowy figure demanding the HOA tighten security or face consequences. The board had reacted by doubling patrols, increasing armed presence, and giving David free rein, but no one had explained the real stakes. As the backup guards closed in, David felt the weight of his responsibility crush down on him. He was the first line of defense, and maybe the last. If he faltered, the whole neighborhood could descend into chaos. He glanced at Jessica again. Her eyes held a quiet fire, a refusal to back down. Part of him admired that, maybe even envied it. But his training told him to stay sharp, to trust no one. "You think you're better than us?" he asked quietly, stepping closer. Jessica met his gaze without blinking. "I think I know what it means to protect people, and what it means to put a gun down before it's too late." David's jaw tightened. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust this woman who seemed so out of place in his world. But trust had become a luxury he couldn't afford. Suddenly, the crackle of the radio shifted his focus. "Backup's here," one of the guards announced, his voice tense. David took a deep breath and forced himself to steady. The neighborhood was watching, the HOA board was watching, and most importantly, David had to watch himself. Because in Cedar Grove Estates, trust was fragile, and danger lurked behind even the most familiar faces. As Jessica's calm resolve stood, in stark contrast to the storm inside him, David realized this night would change everything. He didn't know it yet, but the real battle was just beginning. By morning, the news of the standoff had rippled through Cedar Grove Estates like wildfire. The once peaceful community was fractured, buzzing with whispered rumors and uneasy glances. Neighbors gathered in small groups, their conversations punctuated by sharp words and hushed speculations. Jessica's family found themselves at the center of a storm they never asked for. Her mother, Diane Monroe, paced the living room, her hands trembling as she replayed the previous night's terrifying moments. "How could this happen here?" she whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. "Our own security? Pulling a gun on Jessica?" Jessica sat quietly, her gaze distant but focused. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a gnawing unease. The neighborhood she had grown up in, the place she thought was safe, felt suddenly foreign and hostile. Word had spread fast. Some residents rallied behind the HOA, praising the guards for vigilance in a time of rising crime. Better safe than sorry, they argued at the local cafe. Others, however, were outraged, condemning the use of force and demanding answers. Jessica's younger brother, Mark, faced pointed questions at school. "Did you know your sister's some kind of FBI hotshot?" classmates teased, some in awe, others with a tinge of resentment. Mark didn't know whether to be proud or worried about the growing divide in their community. Meanwhile, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting behind closed doors. Their polished conference room, usually a symbol of order, now felt like a cage tightening around secrets. Board President Linda Shaw opened the session with a heavy sigh. "We must control the narrative," she insisted. "This incident threatens the reputation of Cedar Grove. We cannot let it spiral." Others nodded, but not everyone was convinced. A young board member, Evan Torres, voiced concerns. "We need transparency. The guard overreacted. This could have ended in tragedy." Linda shot him a warning glance. "Watch your tone. This isn't a simple mistake. There are forces at work here. We need to tighten security, not loosen it." Outside the meeting, the tension in the air was palpable. Local news vans began to arrive, cameras poised to capture every angle of the unfolding drama. Journalists sensed a bigger story lurking beneath the surface of quiet suburban life. Jessica knew the stakes were rising. This wasn't just about a mistaken confrontation anymore. It was about power, control, and fear, tangled in a web that reached far beyond the streets of Cedar Grove. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jessica met with a trusted friend, Alex Kim, an investigative journalist who had covered federal cases before. "Something's off," Alex said, eyes sharp. "This guard, the HOA board, they're hiding something, and you're caught in the middle." Jessica nodded. "I can feel it too. This isn't random. There's a pattern, and I need to find out what it is before it's too late." Alex leaned in, voice low. "Be careful. Whoever's behind this has resources, and they won't hesitate to protect their interests." As night fell again over Cedar Grove Estates, the quiet streets seemed darker, the shadows longer. The neighborhood was watching, and Jessica knew that the true battle for safety and truth was only just beginning. Behind the imposing doors of the Cedar Grove Estates HOA headquarters, the atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken threats. The polished conference table gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, but the room felt anything but professional. It was a war room, a place where reputations were made and destroyed in whispers and half-truths. Linda Shaw, the board president, sat at the head of the table, her steely eyes scanning the faces around her. The incident with Jessica Monroe had sent shockwaves through the community, but to Linda, it was more than just a security misstep. It was a threat to the fragile control the board held over the neighborhood. "Everyone is asking questions," Linda began, voice cold and calculated. "The Monroe situation is a liability. We need to manage it before it escalates." Evan Torres, still visibly uneasy, spoke up. "But pulling a gun on a resident, especially someone with Jessica's credentials? The board can't sweep this under the rug. We need transparency." Linda's gaze hardened. "Transparency is a luxury we don't have. There are considerations. The guard, David Mercer, isn't just a security officer. He's our enforcer." A murmur rippled through the room. The word enforcer carried a weight far heavier than security guard. "What exactly does that mean?" Evan pressed, voice tight. Linda leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Mercer's role isn't just to patrol. He's here to intimidate residents who don't comply. We've had problems with certain families, complaints about unauthorized modifications, pets off-leash, late-night gatherings. It's more than rules enforcement. It's about maintaining order, by any means necessary." The room fell silent. The implication, chilling. They were using fear as a weapon, a quiet campaign of control masked by bylaws and security protocols. "And the threat from earlier this week?" another board member asked. "The one that justified doubling security?" Linda's eyes flickered with something darker. "That came from someone with ties to the Monroe family." Gasps echoed around the table. "What?" Evan whispered. "You're saying it's an inside job?" Linda nodded. "There are forces at play within the family, people with vested interests in destabilizing the neighborhood. Mercer is our safeguard against those threats." Evan looked horrified, the weight of the revelation sinking in. "This is more than a security breach. It's a conspiracy." Linda smiled thinly. "Precisely. And if Jessica Monroe thinks she can walk in here and expose us, she's gravely mistaken." Meanwhile, miles away in the Monroe household, Jessica's phone buzzed quietly on the kitchen counter. She picked it up, the screen lighting up with a cryptic message. "Watch your back. Not everyone you trust is on your side." Her heart raced. She had suspected the fight was bigger than a simple HOA dispute, but now she had proof. The enemy wasn't just outside, it was closer than she ever imagined. That night, Jessica sat in the dim glow of her living room, reviewing every detail she knew about the board, the guard, and the hidden tensions in Cedar Grove Estates. She had to find allies, people willing to stand with her against the shadowy forces tightening their grip. But with danger lurking behind every corner, she realized that in this neighborhood, loyalty was a fragile thing, and trust could be deadly. Jessica knew she couldn't trust the usual channels. The HOA board was too deeply entrenched in a web of power, secrets, and intimidation. If she wanted answers and safety, she'd have to use the skills that had made her an FBI tactical commander. It was a game of strategy, precision, and nerves, as taut as the wires on a bomb. Under the cover of darkness, Jessica slipped out of her family's house, blending into the shadows of Cedar Grove Estates. Every step was calculated, every sound analyzed. She was no longer a visitor in this neighborhood. She was a hunter tracking prey. Her first target, David Mercer, the guard who had nearly pulled the trigger on her. She had learned his patrol patterns, the locations where he often disappeared to make calls, and the times when backup arrived. Her instincts told her Mercer was nervous, burdened with secrets he couldn't share. But if she could find out what those secrets were, she could gain leverage. From behind a thick hedge near the community's clubhouse, Jessica watched Mercer meeting with two unfamiliar men in dark suits. Their voices were low but urgent. She couldn't hear the words, but their body language spoke volumes. Tense, conspiratorial, dangerous. Suddenly, a faint click. Jessica froze. A flashlight beam sliced through the bushes. "Hey, what are you doing back here?" Mercer's voice barked. Heart pounding, Jessica stepped into the light, hands raised but defiant. "Looking for answers," she said calmly. Mercer's eyes narrowed. "You're playing a dangerous game, Monroe. This isn't just about HOA rules. You don't know what you're up against." Jessica smiled grimly. "Try me." Before Mercer could respond, the dark-suited men approached, their expressions hardening. One pulled a cell phone, speaking rapidly into it. Backup, or perhaps reinforcements, were on the way. Jessica's mind raced. The odds were stacked against her, but retreat wasn't an option. "Let's make one thing clear," she said, voice low and steady. "I'm here to expose whatever you're hiding, and I won't back down." Mercer hesitated, torn between loyalty to the board and the instinct to protect the neighborhood he'd sworn to keep safe. Just then, a distant siren wailed, a reminder that time was running out. Jessica took a step back, disappearing once more into the shadows, knowing the HOA. Real battle was only beginning. The next day, the community was buzzing. Rumors swirled about the confrontation, about Jessica's midnight prowling. Some admired her bravery. Others whispered warnings about stirring up trouble. Meanwhile, Jessica reached out to Alex Kim, the investigative journalist. Together, they began piecing together a network of corruption, intimidation, and hidden agendas that spanned beyond the HOA boardroom. Each discovery was a thread pulling tighter on a web that threatened to engulf them all. But Jessica wasn't just fighting for herself or her family. She was fighting for the soul of Cedar Grove Estates, and she knew one thing for sure. In this clash of titans, only the sharpest and most ruthless would survive. Jessica's investigation was gaining traction, but so was the danger closing in around her. The shadowy forces within Cedar Grove Estates were watching her every move, their patience wearing thin. It was only a matter of time before they made their next move, and Jessica knew it wouldn't be subtle. Late that night, Jessica received a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old community park, midnight, alone. Come if you want answers." Her gut screamed caution, but her determination was stronger. This was the break she needed, or a carefully laid trap. At exactly midnight, Jessica arrived at the deserted park. The moon cast eerie shadows over the rusted playground equipment, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the neighborhood's security patrols. A figure stepped out from behind a grove of trees. It was David Mercer. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly, eyes wary. Jessica held her ground. "You wanted to talk. I'm listening." Mercer's expression flickered with conflict. "The board's playing a dangerous game. It's not just about control anymore. They're hiding things that could destroy this entire community." Jessica's heart pounded. "What kind of things?" Before Mercer could answer, the sound of footsteps approached rapidly from behind. Jessica spun around, ready for confrontation, but instead, a familiar voice called out, "Jessica! Over here!" Alex Kim emerged from the shadows, camera in hand, eyes sharp. "We've got backup," he said, "and evidence." Together, they confronted Mercer, who lowered his head in defeat. "They've been embezzling funds," Mercer confessed, "using security to intimidate residents who question the board. And there's more, threats against families who don't comply." Jessica felt a surge of resolve. The corruption ran deeper than she imagined, and she had the proof. But, just as relief began to settle, headlights flooded the park. Several black SUVs screeched to a halt, and men in suits poured out, surrounding them. Linda Shaw stepped forward, a cold smile on her lips. "You're trespassing on private property," she said sharply, "and you've made powerful enemies." Jessica's hand instinctively went to her pocket, fingers brushing the compact firearm she always carried. "This ends now," Jessica said, voice steady. "You can either walk away or face the consequences." Linda laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "You think you're in control? You don't know who you're dealing with." But before anyone could react, the distant wail of police sirens echoed through the night, growing louder. Alex grinned. "I called the cops." Chaos erupted. The SUVs peeled out as backup security guards scrambled to regroup. Jessica, Mercer, and Alex took cover behind a grove of trees. In the aftermath, the police swarmed the park, arresting Linda and several board members. The evidence Alex had gathered, recordings, documents, testimonies, was enough to bring down the corrupt regime. As the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief, Jessica stood with Mercer, watching the sun rise over Cedar Grove Estates. "Thank you," Mercer said quietly, "for giving me a second chance." Jessica smiled, the weight of the night lifting just enough to reveal hope. But in the back of her mind, she knew this wasn't the end. There would always be shadows lurking beneath the surface, waiting for their moment to strike, and Jessica Monroe would be ready. As dawn broke over Cedar Grove Estates, the neighborhood was beginning to stir from a restless night that had forever changed its course. The streetlights flickered off one by one, revealing quiet homes bathed in soft morning light, but beneath the calm surface, a hard-earned peace was settling. Jessica Monroe stood on her front porch, watching the neighborhood wake up with a cautious optimism. The corrupt HOA board had been arrested, their dark grip loosened. The news crews had come and gone, leaving behind stories of betrayal, courage, and a community's fight for justice. Her phone buzzed, a message from Alex Kim. "The story's front page tomorrow. You're the hero Cedar Grove needs. Jessica." Smiled but felt a pang of unease. Being a hero was never the goal. She just wanted to protect the people she loved and the neighborhood she called home. David Mercer approached, his steps quieter now, the weight of guilt lifting from his shoulders. "Jessica," he said, his voice sincere, "I want to thank you. You saved this community and me." She nodded, seeing not just the guard who had once pointed a gun at her daughter, but a man who had found redemption through courage. "It's not over, Mercer," Jessica replied. "We still have work to do. Trust takes time, and so does healing." Together, They began working with the new HOA council, comprised of residents dedicated to transparency, safety, and community spirit. Jessica's experience as an FBI tactical commander was invaluable, helping design new security protocols that emphasized communication and respect over intimidation. Word spread that Cedar Grove Estates was rebuilding, not just its infrastructure, but its trust and unity. But Jessica also knew there were lessons to carry forward. The night she faced down her own neighbors taught her that vigilance was essential, and that sometimes the greatest threats came from within. As the community garden bloomed and children played again in the park, Jessica's family felt the slow return of normalcy. Her younger brother, Mark, even found himself proudly telling classmates about his sister's bravery. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jessica sat with her family, sharing a quiet moment of gratitude. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've always been a fighter," Diane said softly, "and now you've helped bring light back to this neighborhood." Jessica looked out over the peaceful streets, the fading light casting long shadows. "I'll always fight for this community," she said, "no matter what." Because in Cedar Grove Estates, hope had been reclaimed, and Jessica Monroe was ready for whatever came next.